Dear board members of World Communication Association, dear Deputy of Parliament of Kyrgyz Republic, dear President of World Communication Association, Professor Siongi Bayek, dear Dr. Chatha, dear participants of the World Communication Association 2017 Biennial Conference, World Conflicts and Disasters, Communication, Culture and Resolution. Dear guests, we are honored to welcome you in Kyrgyzstan and at the American University of Central Asia.
Добрый день, уважаемые участники международной конференции. Добро пожаловать в Американский университет Центральной Азии в Кыргызстане. Добрый день, господин Сион Гибаек. Добрый день, господин Хершчатка.
In 2015 in Lisboa, Portugal, at the 2015 Biennial Conference of World Communication Association, I made a presentation in front of board members of WCA members proposing AUCA and Kyrgyzstan to host 2017 Biennial Conference. Some of the participants and WCA members asked me, is it Kurdistan? Is it safe to go there for a conference? Where is it on the map? Is it a country where human rights are respected and minorities and rights of LGBTs are protected? I answered all of these questions and showed them Kyrgyzstan on the map, that it is not a Kurdistan, that it is in a small mountainous country in Central Asia. So today, I'm honored to welcome 103 participants from 33 countries of the world here at American University of Central Asia and Kyrgyzstan for the 2017 Biennial WCA Conference. Hope you will enjoy the conference, AUCA and Kyrgyzstan.
Уважаемые участники, эта конференция очень знаковая. Она посвящается 34-й годовщине Всемирной ассоциации коммуникаторов. На конференции присутствуют 103 участников из 133 стран мира.
Now, let me invite President of World Communication Association, Professor Siongi Bayek, for welcome speech.
На сцену приглашается президент Всемирной ассоциации коммуникаций, профессор, доктор Сион Гибаек. Пожалуйста.
Okay. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Welcome all of you, especially the participants. You know, I'm really wanted to proudly saying, you know, along the history of WCA and this 2017 conference invite the more than 170 submitters of papers and abstracts. And just before the leader said to you, and then officially 103 people accepted, and then they present their own opinions and their own thought. You know, this conference's main theme is the conflict, world disasters. You know, every day you open the television broadcasting, you figure out the world is encounter of many serious disasters and conflicts, such as global warming, refugee problems, and territorial conflict, and then ideological conflict. So I believe only way to solve such kinds of problems and depends on intercultural communication is better way. Also, we need to develop mutual understanding among all people in the earth. Because, you know, all kinds of conflict might become from an individual's greed and intention or some their very negative desire to control neighboring people and any other thing, especially occupied neighboring countries, okay? So we need to develop a mutual understanding among people. So how we can develop such kind of mutual understanding? We need to depend on many great theory and perspectives which already been developed in intercultural communication studies, cross-cultural communication studies, and also international communication studies. Now, I welcome all of the scholars and then very young graduate students in here. We'll discuss about many important issues with your own thoughtful ideas and inspirations, and then hopefully we enjoy the next 5 days and to compose and a very productive solution to guide the world leaders and world scholars and then ordinary people to solve many serious problems. Again, I really appreciate the really hard work of our local committee member, especially including and then Elira, and also great contribution to make this conference as successful, especially by the Dr. Chada, and then many thoughtful and then the great contributor of local faculty members and students. Without your own great contribution, great effort, we cannot make this conference as a successful one. I really appreciate all of your hard work with the bottom of my heart. So for the next 5 days, please enjoy. You know, you look at the outside, it's a so beautiful day at a beautiful campus and beautiful people. Okay, so we have to develop very good relations, and then we have to share our own really productive ideas and then discuss. Sometimes it's okay, debate, okay, but do not fight. And then you will enjoy the 5 days long time period of this, especially and uniquely 2017 World Communication Conference. Thank you for all. I hope that you will enjoy next 5 days with the beautiful Bishkek and Kyrgyzstan. Thank you.
The president of AUCA, Professor Andrew Wachtel, wrote a welcome speech, so let me deliver his welcome speech. It's a great honor for the American University of Central Asia to host the biennial conference of the World Communication Association. In a world in which we are all instantly connected, it is ever more important that we learn to communicate clearly and consistently across linguistic and cultural divides. As an institution, AUCA has been dedicated to this kind of fluid communication from its inception. Serving students and faculty from many countries, we must find ways to encourage mutual understanding within our own community, and an alliance with an organization such as the WCA is a clear statement of our intent to continue to broaden our efforts to reach a wide audience through research and teaching in the broad field of communication. The particular theme of this conference, World Conflicts and Disasters, Communication Culture and Resolution, is of crucial importance today. Far too many of our conflicts and disasters, particularly of the man-made type, flow directly from failures of communication. So, an understanding of how much failures arrive and how they can be mitigated is of far more than purely scholarly importance. Glancing through the conference program, I'm heartened to see such a broad geographical range of participants and an even broader intellectual range of topics to be discussed. As we are all aware, the most exciting scholarly work these days tends to take place between and among what used to be seen as particular academic disciplines. From the conference program, it is clear that communications, itself a multidisciplinary field, has fully embraced this tendency. I hope that our colleagues from Kyrgyzstan in particular, whose universities are not always able to recognize the value of cross-disciplinary scholarship, and teaching will be better able to appreciate its value as a result of this conference. For those of you who are here for the first time, I would like to tell you that AUCA is open to collaborative work and student exchange with universities from across the world. And if you would like to work with us, we would be very glad to discuss possibilities of collaboration in teaching and research with you. Let me take this opportunity to wish all of the conference participants a successful and intellectually fulfilling experience. I hope that in addition to the conference events, you will have an opportunity to get to know Central Asia in general and Kyrgyzstan in particular during these few days. Please enjoy your time at AUCA and be in touch if you would like to work together going forward. Andrew Wachtel, President of AUCA.
Уважаемые участники, аплодируем действительно за поздравительную речь президента Американского университета Эндрю Вахтель. И аплодируем еще за прочтение Элиры Турдубаевой. Спасибо.
Now let me invite Aida Kasamalieva, Deputy of Parliament of Kyrgyz Republic, for her welcome speech.
Уважаемые участники конференции, следующее слово передается депутату Жогорку Кеңеша Кыргызской Республики Аида Касмалиевой. Спасибо.
Dear honorable guests of the conference, welcome to Kyrgyzstan, welcome to Bishkek, welcome to American University of Central Asia. Kyrgyzstanға қош келдіңіздер. World conflicts and disasters, communication, culture and resolution. The topic of the conference is enormously important. I want to point out that the quality of the dialogue in society helps shape the future of the country. It is difficult to imagine a national development process without communication playing a crucial part. Why? I will tell the reason from the perspective of the Kyrgyzstan. Our country has a diverse society. On one hand, we have a segment in our country who plunged into the iPhones, MacBooks, and drinks every morning strong cappuccino, as I do. But on the other hand, we have a large segment of citizens who do not have even access to clean water. So divide both in terms of access to information and knowledge generates social and political tension. That is why you communicators are leaders of our days. And I want to say again that this conference and the results of this conference is very important for our society, for Kyrgyzstan, and in global perspective. And at the end of my speech, I want to say that communication and culture are a bond that brings a nation together. And that's why I wish you very interesting debates and sessions and good resolutions. Thank you and Chong Rahmat.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bayak, and thank you everyone on the dais. It's beautiful to be with you all because it's a beautiful day in a beautiful country with beautiful people all around us. But more beautiful than that is what we are trying to achieve. And I think it's something which is very important. The reason for that is that we as humanity can try and solve the problem. We don't look at it in an individual capacity, we look at it in a global capacity. And as a global capacity, we try and solve this problem in various ways. We don't want to use conflict to solve a conflict. We want to use soft power to solve a conflict. And this means that we have to educate people to understand and come to the same denominator that we are, so that they can communicate with us, like Professor Bayak said, in the same manner. We all know English, and we all know the alphabets of English, but a lot of times people are all fumbled up with the alphabets. They don't start with A, they start with Z. And I feel many countries in the world are only considering about themselves and considering about what they want individually, but not looking at it in a global manner. So we set out to form a global council for tolerance and peace, because what we all want is peace. And to get to peace, there is only one way, and that is through tolerance. I come from India. I know my forefathers, we were able to get our independence from the British through non-violence, from Mahatma Gandhi's time. But non-violence is a very big subject we can't discuss here. All I'm trying to say is that we want to be able to use tolerance as a medium to get the peace that we need on a universal, on a global level. So I would like to thank the Kyrgyz people, its people and the government for their hospitality, for hosting this important international conference. I would also like to thank the World Communication Association for its kind invitation and its efforts to organize this event, the American University of Central Asia, and all participants in this conference. Truly, not just because I'm connected with this university, but this is one of the universities in the world which is very forward in its way of thinking. And we need young people to keep the future in mind. We hope to be crowned with success in achieving its objectives and interests of people of the whole world, and to foster better communications with people for tolerance and peace. The Global Council for Tolerance and Peace believes that communication is a key method of broad and deep influence of people. Therefore, the importance of these conferences gives currently, critically, and rampant world disputes. It is our hope that meetings and conferences like this will direct education and communication tools in a positive manner to achieve a goal of world peace, security, development, and prosperity for people all over the world. I am confident that we will spare no effort to give effective contributions in this conference for support of peace all around the world. The powers of radicalization and enemies of peace around the world continue to plot evil ideologies and enticements in the minds of youth, agitating students and sedation. During the last decade, we got its bitterness in different places around the world. Today, we faced endless waves of young people who have fallen victim to this malicious enticement, making it necessary to work together to protect our children and new generations from these radical ideologies, and to instill virtues of tolerance and peace, and to immunize these principles against destructive discourse for sake of international generations believing in peace as a collective human option for the future. Our future vision for Global Council for Tolerance and Peace stems from a solid belief that achieving international peace at these times of turmoil especially depends on spreading the culture of tolerance among people by government and non-government entities, whereas virtually all disputes we see in our world today erupt from religious, racist, sectoral reasons. Therefore, we strike to tackle the problem of intolerance between the people, spreading radicalization and violence against others, to research these issues academically and institutionally by university students, telecommunication research centers around the world, with which we aim to maintain continuous communications with these universities, research centers, and contacts and studies. The concept of tolerance carries within it true meaning of soft force, which is necessary to safeguard and protect world peace. Therefore, the Global Council for Tolerance and Peace seeks all its potential to activate its soft power represented in spreading the culture of tolerance in order to achieve its goal in contributing effectively in the efforts to protect international peace. The most important tools whereby we strive to work is education, communication, and media. Therefore, we seek by which to build partnerships and cooperatives with all relative educational and communication entities around the world for a media, cultural, and educational mission based on principle of tolerance and peace. The human responsibility of media and telecommunication is increasingly important in today's interconnected, globalized world. And with its infinite scope, especially for children and youth, therefore we call on all to take extra care regarding media content and means of communication, culture, and educational materials that shape the personalities of our sons and daughters. We send this universal call to work with the Global Council of Tolerance and Peace in all fields to spread the culture of tolerance and peace values and to maintain a safer and secure life for the generations. Finally, I wish to express my gratitude for all of you for your continued pursuit for the world's people, and I would also like to thank WCA and the Kyrgyz Republic, its people, its government, and once again, I hope all our efforts will be crowned with success for the good of humanity. Okay? That's my keynote speech.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for very impressive keynote speech. And then
Thank you.
he also emphasized the importance of education. So, I just missed that point to deliver the Myung-Suk Park's idea, but he just make up, and then we need more focus on the media and education, especially cultural-based education. Thank you for your great speech. Okay, great.
Thank you, Dr. Bayat. And we look forward for participation in the World Council. It's a global council. You're more than welcome. Any of you all want to join it, you all are more than welcome. It will be based out of Malta in the Mediterranean, and it will cover the whole world. Wherever you see the sky on this planet, you will find us. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, thanks a lot. The last time as I met him, and then we discussed about, the last year is election time in the United States. And then we set a dinner table, and we enjoyed the discussion. Who will be winner of that election? Most of participants said Hillary will win. But the only Dr. Chada, no, different opinion. Trump will win. So I couldn't believe his expectations. But you can figure out what is the reality. Trump won. So he got the genius idea. But maybe some international connection, we never know about that. So anyway, today, so he mentioned and Global Council. So if you're interested in that organization, I hope you will enjoy. And then personally, I really hope to you will more contribute to build this university or some Kyrgyzstan or some your all kinds of business too. Okay? Yeah, thank you for your giving a great speech to us. That is opening to guide this 2017 conference. Okay, so next speaker, I invited Professor Jung-Tak Kim, and then he's a very well-known scholar in the Korea as well as in the East Asia levels. now his idea is go expanded to the worldwide. So he tried to combine the traditional the communication theory, and then now is the Oriental philosophical ideas. His approach is very unique, and then his paper and his book is really guided many Korean scholars, and then some we can call Oriental scholars together. Really big and impression. And today I asked him, okay, to open a very thoughtful ideas and then combine the ideas between the East and West. And then he has very worked to get his paper. Okay, I very expected with a very great excitement. Okay, what is his paper and his thought? So, okay, why don't you welcome Professor Jung-Tak Kim. Okay, yeah.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And on your hand, there will be my manuscript of this speech. I hope everyone had a chance to visit Lake Ishkur and the mountains Tinshan, because they showed how beautiful Kyrgyzstan is and why this country is called Switzerland of Central Asia. As a communication scholar, I'm intrigued that Kyrgyzstan is located in the middle of the Silk Road. Through the Silk Road, East and West have exchanged goods and culture. Most people would agree the Silk Road was an important communication network in the history of mankind. Certainly, the world has changed since then. Today, the communication network has expanded significantly via internet and smartphone. Marshall McLuhan must have foreseen the future 50 years ago, because his concept of global village is no longer occurred. But one may question whether the communication content is improving in line with the technology. We have quite perfected brain-to-brain communication, but have we done the same in heart-to-heart communication? If not, perhaps the past communication approach that was likely used in Silk Road could provide some lessons on how we can also communication with heart. Human beings communicate via media. Perhaps the most successful media are currency and language. Currency was created to exchange goods, and language was created to exchange meaning. It is, however, interesting to note that their mechanisms are quite different. For example, currency must match the face value and the actual value. You can consider the face value as signifier and the actual value as signified. Thus, currency has signifier equals signified relationship. On the other hand, it is often difficult to maintain the signifier equals signified relationship in human communication. It is because language or signifier cannot be perfectly objectified or vivid enough to be matched, assault, or signified. East Asia culture perhaps have already realized limitation and prefer to communication in signifier, similar signified relationship. This is also evident in the prevalence of the metaphor in the cultural context of the East Asia communication. In addition, the use of Chinese characters may have something to do with this as well. In Chinese character, the civilization is translated Wen Ming. It combines two characters, language, and enlightenment. It is interesting to see that the civilization refers to the enlightenment through language. If we take one more deeper step, the character enlightenment is the combination of sun and moon, indicating that there are two kinds of light. But when we think of light, we only think of the sun, and this linkage is stronger in the Western philosophy, as evident by the fact that the basis of metaphysics is heliotrope. As most of you know, heliotrope views the world from the perspective of absolute beings such as the sun. This perspective appears as idea in the classical days, as God in the Middle Age, and as rational in the modern days. Concept of the heliotrope divide light versus dark, which further develop into God versus evil and goodness versus badness. This perspective has ultimately created binary opposition in the communication, such as yes or no. As such binary oppositions are repeated, the meaning becomes more focused on the signifier equals signified, becomes natural and fixed. But in the moonlight, the division between the light and the darkness becomes blurry. Thus, under the moonlight, the need for the signifier similar signified becomes more important. In the days of the most modern Western culture, the signifier similar signified relationship is gaining more attention, including Jacques Derrida, one of the most minds that represent the post-structuralism in the Western philosophy. He explained his philosophy as grammatology and adopted the concept of difference to elaborate the new concept of difference. He argued that if the meaning only has a difference, the signifier equals signified relationship could establish. However, if the concept of delay is added, then it will not. Thus, the adopted the concept difference to incorporate signifier similar signified relationship. In the Eastern culture, the signifier similar signified relationship was more favored in the communication. This is reflected in the many of the classical philosophers such as Kongzhi, Lao Tzu, Zhang-Chu used metaphor, not logic, in their books. Zhang-Chu perhaps stands out the most, as his book is considered as literature due to this extensive use of metaphors. In addition, Zhang-Chu and Lao Tzu established signifier similar signified relationship of communication in the Taoism. First, Lao Tzu started his book, Tao Te Ching, with a statement that the signifier equals signified relationship cannot be established. Tao that can be spoken of is not the everlasting Tao. Name that can be named is not the everlasting name. Of course, this does not mean the Lao Tzu support signifier not signified, because such communication is impossible. Thus, Lao Tzu supports signifier similar signified. Zhang-Chu takes a more comprehensive and systematic approach to the concept of impossibility of signify equals signified than Lao Tzu. This is evident in the start of his book. In the northern darkness, there is a fish and his name is Quan. The Quan is so huge, I don't know how many thousand meters he measures. He changed and becomes a bird whose name is Peng. The back of the Peng measures, I don't know how many thousand meters across, and when he rises up and flies up. His wings are like clouds all over the sky. Wavering heat, bits of dust, living things blows each other about. The sky looks very blue. Is that its real color, or is it because it is so far away and has no end? When the bird looks down, all he sees is blue too. In this writing, the key concept is at end. The sky looks very blue. Is that its real color, or is it because it is so far away and has no end? When the birds look down, all he sees is blue too. Here, Changchu mentioned the possibility the sky may be blue not because of its real color, but because it is so far away. Because when penguins look down, it looks blue as well. Wavering heat and bits of dust look similar in shape, but can be differentiated if looked close. However, even mountain, valley, lakes, and ponds cannot be differentiated if looked from far, despite their very different shape. Perhaps our difference can be resolved if we could adopt the physical phenomenon into our communication. As we continue to divide the meaning, there will be more differences among the communicators. But if we combine the meaning, that the difference can be resolved. This is the central piece of the Changchu, the communication philosophy, which is further explained in Chapter 2. Chapter 2 of the Changchu is the most difficult text to understand East Asia classic. In Chapter 2, he defined looks close as small wisdom and looks far as large wisdom. He also stated the small wisdom is tied to the small language and the large wisdom is tied to a large language. When Changchu refers to a small language, it definite words that are clear and objective. This is represented as scientific, logical, which is based on signifier equals signified. However, the large words tend to be more comprehensive and subjective. These languages are metaphoric and is based on the signifier similar signified relationship. Changchu communication philosophy supports large wisdom based on large language. A good example of such communication will be the former US President Obama's speech that was touched by many. There are patriots who oppose the Iraq war in Iraq and the patriots who support it. Under patriotism, the view on Iraq war are a level deeper. And as you can see, the more division leads to conflict. This is certainly the direction that our civilization is currently heading toward, as we are accustomed to the highlighting the minute differences. Unfortunately, our language and words do contribute to this trend, which is why French philosopher Jean Baudrillard referred to commercial as a mechanism to differentiate insignificant difference among products. This tendency is prevalent in all issues across the politics, economy, society, and culture. This makes us wonder that perhaps the media is now preventing our communication. If that is the case, then it is due to the legacy of the signify equals signified relationship, and as a communication scholar, it is something we should reflect on. Communication is an act on its own, but if we can find our reason for existence through our communication, then it will certainly add more meaning. Nowadays, the communication stops at the acting level, and the technology advancement is encouraging such limitations. So, Perhaps now we are simply human doing instead of human being. As a result, I will show a way to solve conflict through communication. First, authoritarian way. For example, God say, Bible say, or wise men say, like that. Second, ethical way. William Habermas' ideal speech condition is a representative example. Under this condition, he said, with not great chance, equal chance to say, to express, to insist like that. The last one is scientific way. I think Changchu's looking far with a large language is a good example for a scientific way. Metaphor is a good example as a large language. If so, science is naturally related to aesthetic in communication. If England has Shakespeare, China has Levi. Levi represents Chinese classical literature and his poetry is based on Taoism. I have recently heard that Levi's hometown is here, Kyrgyzstan. For that, I'm quite honored to discuss the Taoism communication philosophy in Levi's hometown. For that, I would like to end my speech with one of his poems. If the heaven did not prefer wine, the heaven would not have had wine stars. If the land did not prefer wine, the land should not have had wine ponds. For the heaven and the land prefer wine, drinking wine is not the shame to the heaven. I heard the clear wine is saints and the bloody wine is a wise man. Both saints and wise drink wine, wise is the hermit. 3 drinks leads to Tao, and 1 gallon makes one with the nature. So, if the intent of the drinking is understood, do not offer to those that do not drink. Thank you.
Okay, isn't it really impressive keynote speech? Okay, he tried to combine all the Oriental philosophies and in today's the present communication theory. I think that is very impacted by the semiotic concept. Many great figures in that areas. Yeah, I think that is deliver his idea, in-depth ideas to discuss about, superficial level of communication issues and items. And he really developed to deliver his idea, which is really has been created by his long time effort. He got the unique contribution to develop communication theory, especially many reflected in the Oriental ideas, which has a long history in the East Asian countries. So I really thank you to deliver his great speech, and that is a keynote speech. Also, he delivered in-depth level of ideas and thought to build up very good superficial level of communication theories. Okay, next the keynote speaker. I really invite her, and her name is Caroline Thomas, and then she was a former president of WCA, and especially her speech is a very rhythmic presentation with a beautiful voice and then beautiful vocabularies. I really love her speech very much. Now it's time you can make a sense how much beautiful, how much thoughtful her speech is done. Okay, I welcome the Caroline Thomas, former president of our association.
Good morning. Thank you. Dearest honorable participants, warmest greetings to all of you who are assembled here in beautiful Bishkek, a place that has such warm, hospitable people in it. A place with a proud, rich cultural heritage. On behalf of the National Communication Association in the United States of America, which studies all forms of communication, modes, media, and consequences of communication through humanistic, social scientific, and aesthetic inquiry, I greet you. On behalf of the illustrious President of the National Communication Association, Dr. Stephen Hartnett, a scholar leader who has devoted so much of his time to projects that foster harmony and goodwill toward all people, I greet you. Dr. Hartnett's devotion to decent, progressive intercultural causes has found expression in the National Communication Association's Task Force on Internationalization, of which I am co-chair. The task force fosters collaborations in research, teaching, and service. Thank you, President Beck, for giving me this opportunity to use my voice in expressing an idea that I think is very crucial as we confront a world in conflict. Tomorrow will be too late. I am dying. Please help. These are some of the haunting, moving, and anguishing pleas that have emanated from Aleppo in Syria, a place of genocide where many innocent women and children cried out for mercy as ISIS and the Syrian army wreaked havoc in their country. The Syrian army has already killed 500,000 people. Although there is a ceasefire presently in Syria, many people there are still grieving over some of the deepest wounds it is possible for one human being to inflict upon another. Today, some journalists, among them Douglas Murray, argue that by the end of the lifespans of most people currently alive, Europe will not be Europe, and the peoples of Europe will have lost the only place in the world they have to call home. Murray's dire comments, growing out of his and others' alarm regarding the presence of millions of immigrants and refugees in Europe, call attention to demographic and political realities that humans confront in the 21st century. Globally, we argue tenaciously over what to do, when, how, and with what effect. As a world citizen, I am deeply concerned about so many compelling, horrific events and so much coarse, cruel talk in the world, because they have far-reaching consequences for society, for how we live and move and order our lives. But how do we find a way out of messiness, misery, chaos, and conflict? My answer is, we must view human thought and behavior through and empathetic lens. Empathy. Empathy is a humane way of grappling with a world in crisis. In this highly energy-intensive, interconnected place where humans are in danger of destroying the Earth's biosphere, we must find words and actions necessary to help us solve the many problems we face. To do so requires exquisite cooperation and empathy. But too often, our faithfulness to the narratives we have spun and are spinning prevents this happening. That is our ability to do all of the things that we need accomplished in order to save the planet, this great, good place called Earth. I argue it can be done through empathetic living and new forms of storytelling. In his book, *Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind*, University of Oxford educated historian Yuval Noah Harari notes compellingly, and I quote him, "Most people do not wish to accept that the order governing their lives is imaginary. But in fact, every person is born into a pre-existing imagined order, and his or her desires are shaped from birth by its dominant myths. For example, Westerners are shaped by romantic, nationalist, capitalist, and humanist myths that have been around for centuries. However, in order to make the most of our human potential, we must confront one of the most important questions facing humanity, as Jeremy Rifkin, one of the most popular social thinkers of our time, observes in The Empathic Civilization. The question is, can we reach global empathy in time to avoid the collapse of civilization and save the Earth? I agree with Harari and Rifkin that present-day Western narratives that are shaped by romantic, nationalist, capitalist, and humanist myths also compete with oppositional, potent myths. Our imagined orders are intersubjective. So in order to manage our lives more cooperatively, we must simultaneously change the consciousness of billions of people, which is not easy, as Harari notes. He cautions, however, that in order to change an existing imagined order, it is necessary to convince many strangers to cooperate with one another. It follows then that in order to change an existing imagined order, we must first believe in an alternative imagined order with new, more compelling narratives. I offer as a new alternative narrative the practice of empathy, so we can avoid social, economic, and cultural planetary disaster. Although the world is complex and various, and although there are no easy answers for what ails the world, from catastrophes to huge economic inequalities worldwide, to the rise of robots and the threat of a jobless future for so many of the 7.5 billion humans on Earth, to mass immigration, I offer forms of empathy as a way of binding human beings to each other. In my book, Empathy in the Global World, an Intercultural Perspective, and other works, I examine the extent to which empathy argues one type of community into existence, one based on peace, respect, and universal values as opposed to arguing another kind of community into existence, one based on turmoil, meanness, wretchedness, genocide, and heaps of trouble. Empathy, I contend, helps humans to cooperate effectively, living safely and peacefully in a just and prosperous society, to borrow from Harari's Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. Since principles exist in our fertile human imaginations, and since we have the capacity to invent all sorts of stories and think in unprecedented ways, employing empathetic impulses, we can shape the life of our communities crucially. From the arts, music, drama, song, and dance to public policy. Let us look more closely at the meaning of empathy, why it matters, as well as offer practical ways for global citizens to develop knowledge and information-based skills. Empathetic literacy, a pedagogy of empathy. By a pedagogy of empathy, I mean knowledge and information-based skills that help global citizens respond to and manage intercultural encounters caringly and competently. We must not only recognize the very centrality of empathy in our lives, but also practice empathy. We truly need a pedagogy of empathy. We need to create programs of empathetic literacy. But what is literacy? And what is empathy? Let us start with the proposition that empathy is a difficult concept to grasp. It is nuanced. That is a great historical and philosophical fact that we must face at the outset. By empathy, I mean the ability imaginatively to enter into and participate in the world of the cultural other, cognitively, affectively, and behaviorally. That is, we must change what we think, what we feel, and what we do. The phrase imagining the feelings of others means that we understand the behavior of others better when we are able to enter their world and see it through their eyes. Of course, attempting to see the world through the eyes of the other does not mean that we can duplicate others' actual feelings, but rather we can suspend judgment and seek to enter their minds and feelings through imaginative participation, which is a commitment to learning what it is like to live by someone else's light. In this sense, empathy is also under the rubric of geography, because empathy draws connections between the near and the distant. Because one cannot always be physically present with the other, empathy requires cognitive and attitudinal movement in time and space. If practiced pristinely, empathy takes you there, into the shared imagination of thousands and millions of people. The work of 19th century abolitionists is one of the most exquisite examples of the spatial reach of empathy. Although their audiences were worlds apart from the individuals whom they sought to persuade, Thomas Clarkson, William Wilberforce, and other British abolitionists used their voices to make Britons understand what lay behind the sugar they ate, the tobacco they smoked, and the coffee they drank. I am, of course, referring to the monster slavery, which destroyed so many black people in the 19th century. As Adam Hochschild notes in Bury the Chains, in England itself, There were no caravans of chained captives or slaves, no whip-wielding overseers on horseback stalking the rows of sugarcane. But despite the distance, the far way was nearby, and Britons learned to distinguish between the tobacco they smoked and the coffee they drank. And empathy worked. It changed the British Empire. Empathy changed the world in dynamic and elegant ways. At its best, empathy relies on as-if propositions from cognitive, affective, and behavioral points of view. Jeremy Rifkin puts it this way: one is empathetic when one has the ability to read and respond to another person as if he or she were oneself, which is the key to how human beings engage the world, create individual identity, develop language, learn to reason, become social, establish cultural narratives, and define reality and existence. My discourse-focused study of empathy and conflict offers several practical uses of empathy that have huge consequences for civil society, intercultural communication, and geopolitics, of which the following two are most crucial. First, empathy sustains civil society robustly by constituting and promoting equal human dignity. Empathy is an argument. It persuades. I remain faithful to the proposition that virtuous empathy is a necessary condition for highly desirable human outcomes. Understanding my argument about desirable human outcomes is an assumption that philosopher Immanuel Kant advances in his work, The Metaphysics of Morals. I agree with Kant that in the moral realm of things, respect for dignity is owed all human beings, regardless of their standing in community. Humanity itself is a dignity. For a man, person cannot be used merely as a means by any man or woman, but must always be used at the same time as an end. We are under obligation to acknowledge in a practical way the dignity of humanity in every other man or woman. Jonathan Glover, in his work, Humanity and Moral History of the 21st Century, argues our inclination to show respect and our disgust at someone's humiliation is a powerful restraint on barbarism. May I repeat that? Our inclination to show respect and our disgust at someone's humiliation is a powerful restraint on barbarism. Robbing human beings of their dignity is dramatically revealed in the Ritzburg massacre that occurred in India in 1919 when troops under British General Dyer ordered his soldiers to fire into a peaceful Indian protest. Dyer's men killed between 100 and 1,000 individuals and wounded a similar number. After the dust had settled and people observed the carnage, powerful questions emerged. How could this have happened? How could General Dyer have ordered this atrocity? Glover provides keen insight into why the atrocity occurred. He says, Indians' protected dignity had already been violated, which is why I preach against violating people's protective dignity. Glover says that every day, in countless ways, Indians had to salute and salam when they met British authorities. They had to dismount when a British officer approached and even lie down and rub their noses in the dust and grovel, because the soldiers' everyday behavior had become ordinary. Mercy, in the form of thinking and feeling, simply did not enter into their worldview. This is precisely what empathy tries to present and prevent. Weren't these acts supposed to occur? What dignity was owed Indians? The crucial point is that showing respect for someone's dignity symbolizes that person's moral standing in the community. The coursing of discourse in what is increasingly becoming a divided world has embedded within it a severe warning about what happens when we rob others of their protective dignity. As Hannah Arendt so perceptively wrote about the Nazis, the trouble with Eichmann was precisely that so many were like him, and that the many were neither perverted nor sadistic, that they were and still are terribly and terrifyingly perverted and normal. Arendt's proposition makes me shiver and shiver and shiver at the thought of what happens when we do not assume goodwill, when we do not identify with another's plight as we seek to live empathetic lives. Second and finally, goodwill lies at the very core of empathy. Goodwill is made possible when we give people the benefit of the perceptual doubt. This is empathetic literacy in practice. This is empathy pleading for us to do business in an environment of trust and friendship, which also extends to strangers. Philosopher Immanuel Kant reminds us the only good thing that is good without qualification is the goodwill. May I repeat that? The only thing that is good without qualification is the goodwill. What a marvelous idea. What an alluring way to link the subjective consciousness of one individual to another. I urge all of you assembled here this day to help me, to help us convince millions of strangers to begin the work of empathy. At the end of anger, after advising his brother Novartis that life is too short to waste it being angry, and after admonishing Novartis that we should concentrate our empathetic attention on virtue alone, Seneca writes one of the most moving comments in the annals of cultural history that should serve as a guide for universal respect and goodwill. At any moment now, we shall spit forth this life of ours. In the meantime, while we still draw breath, while we still remain among human beings, let us cultivate humanity. Thank you so much.
Okay, Professor Jongtak, I want to invite you here on the stage. Yeah, isn't it beautiful, the speech? Also, the long time ago, as I began to learn English, I normally adapt Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech, I have a dream. But whenever I heard Dr. Caroline Thomas' speech, I got all kinds of impression deeply in my mind. I very observed her speech, follow very consideratively. So, even though this is a little bit long keynote speech, but I cannot figure out how fast her speech is gone. Okay, I do not want to touch her speech, but the main thought is I heard empathy and also global empathy. Okay, so I really hoped you got a lot of impression, okay? And then unfortunately Dr. Chada, because he has another schedule, he is not comfortable at the sitting down for a long time, and then he already gone, okay? So, but anyway, we have a very different voice. One, Professor Jung Tak Kim from the, I just simply summarized that is Oriental voice. And then the second voice from the Westerners, that is a very in-depth, the philosophical thought, and also that is connected to the main theme in the intercultural communication, empathy. Okay, so now you are sitting down for 1 hour already. So it's time for you feel a little bit tired, and then some very cannot stand it, sitting long time. But we have to make another round. If you have a question and comment, and to feel free to ask this to distinguished scholar. I really wanted to give some chance. Or if the local, the Kyrgyzstan scholars, if you got some of difficulties in answering with English, is okay. For some of your scholars with a good English speaker, and they can translate. So whatever you want to comment, question, and discussion, it's open to you. Okay? Yeah. Why don't you start now? Raise your hand, and then we want to discuss a little bit more.
My question is, how do we inculcate or teach our leaders, the world leaders, the empathetic pedagogy, so that they will be sane people that rule the world and have this, if there's empathetic pedagogy, they will make the world better and peaceful. Thank you.
That's a lovely question and a very challenging question when I consider our leaders today. But I think that one of the things that our leaders could do would be to take some courses in intercultural communication and learn about how one shifts from one's own perspective to the perspective of the other. I think that is one of the most difficult shifts that some human beings can make, but I still think it can be accomplished through the teaching of narratives, for example. One of the beautiful things about literature is that literature teaches us to shift our perspective from how we see the world to how other human beings see the world. So that would be the first thing, and I could give them a list of books that I would have all leaders read for that shift. One of which would be Harari's book that I mentioned today. He has not paid me for this, but I will say that his book, Sapiens, is just beautiful. And he talks a great deal about the meanings of narratives and how critical and crucial it is for us to simply shift our focus. Some folks refer to this as a shifting of standpoint theory. I suppose because I grew up in a very small town and because I read so many books and novels when I was growing up, it seems really easy, but I know it's not, for us to shift our perspective and to just imagine. And that's why I referenced, even though I did not develop it as fully as I might have, a focus on imagination. Imagining the other person's placement. For example, can we imagine what it would be like to be rich like Donald Trump? Empathy says we can. Can we imagine what it would be like to have the mental faculties that an ISIS person has? Empathy says we can, through imaginative placement. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying that we have to agree with individuals, but rather shift our focus, our emphasis, our perspective, such that we can see the world through the lens of somebody else. Just put on another pair of glasses and say, President Trump is President of the United States of America, what must he be going through? Or Barack Obama was President of the United States, what did he go through? What happens to children who have been severely beaten and wounded by ISIS? What must their life be like at this moment? How many of us can think about what life must be like for those children? I ask you that. Think of how their lives have been rearranged. They cannot go to classes. Can we think? Can we go there? And I think that we can. So that would be a long way, I guess, of saying that I would recommend to leaders that they read deeply and vertically, so that if they do not have the orientation toward the other, they would gain it as quickly as possible, because the world is really in a pretty messy way, is it not?
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah.
Good morning, I'm Chris Galloway from New Zealand.
Oh, hello. Are you related?
We can find out later, maybe. I want to thank you for your speech about empathy, your passionate advocacy of that, and I fully accept that as a fundamental principle. You mentioned the Syrian conflict, which is something I'm talking about on Sunday, including narratives. And I wanted to ask you how, bearing that particular tragic conflict in mind, empathy might be turned from a foundation principle of the way that people ought to relate to one another into some kind of strategy that could lead to even reconciliation. And I say that knowing that we have a multiplicity of groups in Syria who are divided in all kinds of ways, for all kinds of reasons, hate on the one side, hate on the other side. How can empathy be introduced into that complex situation?
I would recommend having a dialogue such that the president of Syria, perhaps the president of the United States, perhaps presidents of other countries, were to get together in a room. I'd put them in a room and I wouldn't let them out until they came up with some empathetic impulse, so that they could have an opportunity to present their perspective. You know, why is it that you're holding fast to the positionality you have? Then I would ask the other people, what is your perspective? And then I would say, if I may be granted permission to use the Bible here, come, let us reason together. And then I would have a volleying back and forth and say, you know, what are the points of agreement? What are the points of disagreement? If we have disagreements, how can we reconcile those disagreements? And I would posit the idea that if they stayed in that room without my allowing them to get out, that they would come up with some reason, some good reasons. And one person defined rhetoric as the substance of good reasons. And I think if we come up with good reasons why people see the world as they do. I often ask myself, what has the United States done to some people? Don't answer. But I do ask that question. And so that's one question I would want to put to people. What is the nature of your grievance? And if I understood the nature of their grievance, maybe I could find a way out of these confining, defining, demeaning spaces and places that take us where we do not wish to go. So that's one thing that I would do. You're welcome.
Okay. Are there anybody? Yeah. Please, yeah, give a microphone. Yeah.
Professor Zakirov, Kyrgyzstan. So I am for the first time in such a conference. It's a pleasure to me to have, for example, so many friends, so many guests. My question is, it's a little bit practical. For example, how can the results of such kind of conference be recommended for the practical solution or contribution to the solving some world conflicts and disasters? Thank you.
So do you ask it both?
No, you.
Me?
Yeah.
Why?
Surprise.
Surprising. I'm just the moderator and the chairman. But because you asked me, and then I just the response to your questioning. The practical reason, first of all, because I'm the scholar in the journalism and communication studies, I have trained a lot and building intercultural communication for a long time. So, the many guys normally do not think. The theory is just a theory, and the practice is another field. But if you really actualize, and then the perspective, you need to start with theory and perspective, which was taught by the many textbooks and in many great the articles. And then after that, you believe some ideas. This one is a very the important thing was maybe easiest way to practice your idea. I think you try to combine those ideas. Basically for myself, and then I build up the many intercultural communication theories. And then since around 1989, I founded this association. And then I made up my mind of joining this association because this association is not just developed the theory itself, but they just advocate some practical things. So this association welcomed many the cultural activists and the practitioners. So I share that kind of ideas. And then for last the 2 decades, I have joined this association and then build up many real actual things to guide to the society. Some of our country leaders and then some worldwide leaders, and then need to listen what we are suggesting you theoretically, or sometimes very practical thing to be actualized. So you ask me, what is the real practical things? I think basically, based on the strong the theoretical perspectives, and you believe which part might be actualized or realized, and that we can select those things and to organize something, to ask our own idea and the real the powerful figures, and to actualize those things. And sometimes we set a policy and then to join that kind of committee and then develop some kinds of policy which will be actualized. That is my own idea. Yeah, thank you for your questioning, okay?
Oh, hi, I'm Lucianne Carey. I'm coming in from Dubai, and I might add it's a place that we keep telling ourselves is the Switzerland of the Middle East. I'm surrounded by a conflict in Syria, conflict in Mosul, which is headed for Raqqa. I am living next to Iran. We have the ongoing conflict and terrible cholera epidemic in Yemen. And now in the last few weeks, Qatar. The relationship with Qatar is changing. So I talked to the journalists involved. They're too afraid to send anybody into these regions. They don't survive. So to even get the truth about what's happening on the ground is very difficult. My question is, and it follows up on the last question, we can communicate, we can talk, we can try and change people's ideas. And I do like this suggestion about putting leaders into a room, but I'm a little wary that Trump does not read books and does not read much beyond a few pages. So what I'm really looking for...
There are other leaders in the world, I might add.
Yes. and that might be very good at this point in time. And there are shifts in leadership and where power is moving. It's certainly moving east in some ways. But I think the question in my mind, what can you do, what could you suggest to move from the thinking to, as I say, the practical, the action that both is local and global? I think that maybe mobilization through organized structures is possible. The corporations are organized, the military is organized, and also higher education is organized. And they are structures of thinking, communication. And so what could be that shift to taking action? Because I think it's needed and it's needed on a very timely basis.
I agree, and I applaud you for your lovely comments. And I do agree with you that at some point, and this is implicit in your statement, that at some point, we must collectively as human beings not leave the workings and imagination of the world up to our leaders. And one of the things that I do is I teach empathy in my classroom. So I'm very concerned about the people who are coming up today so that I can change their perspectives. So one of the things, for example, that I do in my class, I read a lovely book called Infidel. How many of you read that book, Infidel by Hershey Ali? Well, you would be in for some good reading. But how many of you remember the death of the great-nephew, I hope I got the greats correct, of Vincent van Gogh, who was killed in Amsterdam some years ago? Well, Hershey Ali was the reason that the great-nephew of Vincent van Gogh was killed. And he was killed primarily because of film titled Submission, which was an interrogation of Islam, was unacceptable to the young man who killed Van Gogh. Now, in my class, I take the first page from Infidel, and I have all my students read it. It's the most enlightening thing that you could ever read. And it tells in one page, in a condensed way, how some people think and why they think the way they do. For example, when we meet her, Hershey Ali, we find her sitting under the tall tree with her grandmother teaching her all of her history, forging her identity. So that's one thing that I think that people can do. The other thing that I think that we can do is we can mobilize. We can mobilize, and I think we do mobilize and protest and demonstrate and dramatize that we are not happy with the state of affairs. I think those are probably the best things that we can do. Also have letter writing campaigns so that our congressmen and women know that we are unhappy with the state of affairs. Someone else might have something he would like to add.
Yeah. My opinion is very humanistic touch, to be free from my stereotype mind and then keep calm rather than talk, okay, and discuss.
Okay. Yeah, why don't you bring you first and then you second, okay? Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Beck. Thank you so much, Professor Calloway, for your presentation. Very deep in meaning, very passionate, very much in line with the theme of the conference, world conflicts and disasters. In relation to that, and in relation to what Professor Beck said earlier, one of the main reasons for world conflict is failure in communication. We've been engaged in a lot of dialogues, discussions about this over and over again, but nothing is done. You still see a lot of conflicts, world conflicts happening in many parts of the world. So my question is, what can we do to end the conflict, focusing more on communication? Thank you.
You ask me or
yes,
to you?
Professor Beck.
Beck? Yeah, okay. Yeah, but we normally discuss a lot, and we developed many discourses and dialogues. But you need to the more to tolerate, okay? Even though there is no ending of discussion, discourses, and dialogue, because the world disaster we just identified, that world disaster, but there are very different kinds of conflict and disaster happen to occur at this time of moment. So we need to look at what is the real nature of those disaster and conflict, and also we have to develop so many perspectives and ideas to resolve those things. You know, you just look at some maybe 20 years ago. You know, you needed to compare very different nature of world disasters and world conflict. We normally said world means, okay? Global warming is world disaster. We never thought about that kind of global warming is affect our own life and every day. And also the dust fines, okay? So, you know, in those, the East Asian countries, because of a Mongolian area or some northern area of China, because they have developed many dusties and to expand it, South Korea and Japan. So we got to suffer a lot. That was not just the national boundary issues. That is also worldwide issues. And also, you know, the Syrian refugee. This is a factor to the Western European country or Eastern European country itself and the Middle East itself. This is very closely connected, okay? So even though you're just tired of developing dialogue discourse, no, that is endless of developing dialogue and discourses about the world disaster and conflict. We need to develop more powerful theory. But the theory is not just rhetoric. You know, as our Dr. Jung Tak Kim mentioned, you know, signifier and the signified is very similar to each other. You can develop dialogue and discourse that is automatically connected to some practical level. Because why we organize this kind of conference? Because of many scholars' impact to develop more very powerful theory. And then many politicians and then activists or some very worldwide figures recognize some theory that is connected to some of the idea to solve such kind of big problem. National boundary conflict, or some regional boundary conflict, and worldwide conflict. So, but our conference is mainly focused on worldwide conflict because we needed human beings' effort. I think that's a very good approach and empathy and global empathy. Also, Dr. Jung Tak Kim's, and then in depth of meaning to understand human being and also human doing. Yeah, that's my answer. Okay.
May I quickly add as well, Leonard Drew wrote a book called The Nature of Prejudice, and in that book he talks about the road to pogroms. You know, how did we get to Nazi Germany? And he says in that book, we started with talk. And he calls that first phase anti-locution. And so I ask all of us, what happens when we hear people talking negatively about another group? Do we stop them? Because anti-locution escalates. It moves from talking about people to prejudice, from prejudice to discrimination, and then we get Rwanda, and then we get Nazi Germany. Where does it start? It starts with the mouth, the lips, how we talk about other human beings, which is one of the things I practice. I do not allow people to degrade other people in my presence. It does not take much to escalate. And recall that Hitler called the Germans what? Bacilli, vermin. In Rwanda, the Hutus called the Tutsis cockroaches. And what does one do to a cockroach? You squash it. And so it's easy, and that's what I tell my colleagues in America. You don't want to go down the road of talking negatively, viciously, mean about other human beings, because and pretty soon you're over there where you don't want to be. So I think that's one thing all of us can do, is be mindful of our language and how we see the other and how we talk about the other, because we may become leaders too, presidents, and we'll take our orientation with us, our attitudinal frames of mind. So if you have a robust attitudinal frame of mind, I think it helps change the world, one person at a time.
Okay, so lady, yeah, why don't you bring the microphone to her? Yeah.
Good morning. Thank you very much for. My name is Medina. Originally, I'm from Kyrgyzstan. Right now, I live in Ukraine, Kiev. And thank you very much for your insightful speeches. And I had a question about empathy. I'm a family psychologist, and the question of empathy is very, 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 present when it comes to conflicts. And I think it's the same way worldwide. But the problem that I find over and over is that people are not able to show the empathy towards themselves. And we learn, and for years, people go into psychotherapy learning just to give this empathy to themselves. And that's why it's so hard for us, to put ourselves in other person's shoes, because we don't know. We are very good in punishing ourselves and criticizing ourselves and putting ourselves down, but not so much in empathy.
I agree with you, and also because our narratives are so internalized and so ingrained and so much within our bloodstream. They really do enter our bloodstream. So I agree with you. Sometimes we imbibe these prejudices through the milk of our mothers, and I agree, that it's very difficult, and I hope I acknowledge that in my presentation, that it's not an easy road to travel. But I tell you, it's a road we must travel if we are to change the human condition and save the biosphere, save what I refer to as great good earth that I love. Someone mentioned the blue sky. I don't want to leave here. I don't know about you, but I just want to be on this great good earth for as long as I possibly can. And so toward that end, I think we should do all we possibly can do in a compelling way to alleviate conflict and disasters and what else?
If I can add, please, when you said about being mindful and how you talk about other people, the problem is that we're not mindful of what we talk about ourselves. We're in conflict with others because we're in conflict with ourselves. It's always projected. And
so self-discovery, that's one of the things that I talk about. What do you know about yourself? Who was the philosopher said, know thyself? Do you know yourself? And I think if we know ourselves, then we can make the cue jump to somebody else. And I do agree with you that the destiny starts within our own bosoms and places and spaces, so that if we don't love ourselves, it's very difficult to love another human being. So I think that's a beautiful point. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, the gentleman over there. Over there. Okay.
May I make a proposition on which I would invite the distinguished speakers' comments? We've heard quite a bit this morning about the concept of tolerance. It seems to me that it's very important for us to have a shared understanding of what tolerance actually is. And my perception is that there is a common misunderstanding of tolerance as something that is passive. In other words, we passively allow other people to do their thing, other people to hold different beliefs and so on, whereas my conviction is that tolerance has to do with an active and accepting engagement with the other, not something that is passive. And so I'd welcome your insights on that comment. Thank you.
Do you raise your hand? Yeah, okay, yeah.
Do you want to respond to that comment?
I would agree. Because I think you gave a beautiful definition of how not to see or view tolerance. Because it does sometimes say, it's passive, it's just sitting and sagging, not going anywhere, just tolerate anything goes. But sometimes we don't want anything to go. And I agree with you that it is more passive than it is active, and we need active minds, being mindful.
Yeah, your turn.
Professor Thomas Calloway, really loved your presentation, and the prophetic tradition is so clearly rooted in what you're saying. Kind of a multi-pointed question, right? Where are the borders and responsibilities of empathy? And I ask this in relationship to a couple things, right? Mm-hmm. You referenced Arendt's Eichmann at Jerusalem, which is a very positive thing. Mm-hmm. But Arendt, at the end of that, what she says is that actually Eichmann put himself out of humanity and therefore killing him, while she disagrees with the judge's verdict, right? It's not that she disagrees with the killing of him, actually. She disagrees with the reasons that the judges in Jerusalem decided to put him to death, right? So she's quite happy that, and thinks that actually he should be put to death, right? which is kind of a defining and defending a particular boundary of what it means to be human, right? Which is also part of that boundary of where we're talking about with empathy, right? Can you put yourself outside of empathy? That's the question. The other part is, sorry, multi-parted question.
Yeah.
The other part of that is about responsibility, right? In the sense that when we talk through Paulo Freire or bell hooks, right, we recognize that responsibility lies in particular locales, right, to kind of continue your spatial metaphor. Where do you think that works? Because it actually, for Freire, doesn't actually sit at Trump's door. Freire couldn't give a shit what Trump thinks about emancipation. Actually, he doesn't, right? So where do you think that the responsibility and the borders for empathy lie?
Well, I guess I would think that they're boundless, impermeable, primarily because I think we stretch empathy as far as it can go, using degrees of freedom. So we have 1 to 20, 20 of the degrees of freedom, we go to 20. If 1,000 is the degree of freedom, we go to 1,000. But you're saying something even more powerful, and that is, does empathy have limits? And I do agree. When I think of the dark side of empathy, I didn't talk about it because I always wait for someone to mention it. But there is a dark side of empathy. And the dark side of empathy, as far as I can see it today, is what's happening in Sweden. I mean, and the fidelity to narratives in Sweden is so potent, such that Swedes cannot acknowledge that something is going on in Sweden. They cannot acknowledge that something is happening there because they have enveloped and cloaked themselves into this loveliness that we call empathy. But that's a dark side of empathy. And we can find ourselves being so empathetic to another person's positionality, such that we could wake up one morning and say, well, what has happened to me? I was being empathetic. So I think that's a dark side that requires some manipulation in terms of whether to go over here or whether to go over there, whether to go up to the sky of, midpoint or whatever. So that's a really, really deep, deep thoughtfulness that you've given us.
I also think there's the idea of the kind of Starbucks empathy, right? This idea that I can cure poverty in Africa by buying a cup of coffee.
Yes.
I mean, that's just a great, since I'm from the US as well, there's also that kind of empathy, right? That's faux or kind of, again, the dark side, just another example of what that negative empathy
Or if we go to the United States of America and think of people who protest against building walls between Mexico and the United States. Some of the very people who talk against the building of the walls lived in walled communities. Let me weep here. They live in walled communities. They make no connection between saying, Trump, don't you do that wall thing, and then they drive their Mercedes, they drive their Lexus, they drive their whatever into those gates that surround them, enclose them, and
protect them.
Quote unquote. It's the hypocrisy that galls me.
Yeah,
I think that you ought to talk the talk and walk the walk.
Okay.
If you believe in humanity, if you believe in principles, those principles ought to be manifest. And you cannot say, I'm against walls, and then enclose yourself inside a wall.
Amen.
Okay. And then Dr. Jong-tak Kim is supposed to suggest something important. Yeah.
In my opinion, empathy cannot be absolutely result from the brain-to-brain communication, from heart-to-heart communication. Okay? Mm-hmm.
That's it. Okay. But today I found out empathy theory, the negative empathy. I thought first time to be heard that the identification of the negative empathy. Okay, but we'll discuss later about that issue. I found some, raise your, And then we wanted to one or two more questions, and then we just wrapping up.
Professor Akhatova from Kazakhstan. Thank you for very interesting plenary session. Thank you for speakers. And my question is addressed to Professor Yong Tak Kim. Your report was very interesting, and could you clarify, please, the metaphoric idea about moon and sun as an indicator of the light, and how is related to communication? Is it clear? Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, how do you already presented the moon and sun? Yeah, okay, what is connected to the communication? Yeah, the metaphor. Mm-hmm.
I already mentioned about that. The Myung, in Chinese, the pronunciation the Meng. The Meng, there are two meanings. One is the sun, and the other is the moon. In the East Asian culture, the lightning has two kinds of the meaning. One, the light of the sun and the light of the moon. Light of the sun is leads to the objectify and vividify in the meaning. But the light of the moon leads to the signifier similar to signified. That is very important to solve the conflict each other. The conflict came from the signified equals signified. Okay?
Can you understand? Okay. Okay, who's next? Okay, yeah, the lady, over there. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Rose Miza from UPM, Malaysia.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is related to Professor Kim Tak's discussion again.
Okay.
I'm very fortunate to listen to this interesting presentation because discussion on communication with the integration of communication from the classical Asian literature is not easy, it's very rare, and it's not easy to get from current scholars nowadays. Right. And then you mentioned that communication technology is a problem to communication because it tend to it make us doing rather than enjoy the human being aspect of communication. But the thing is, I love technology, and the problem is technology and communication is like Romeo and Juliet, and we cannot force them to be separate. Okay. So how do we ensure that we can enjoy communication at the same time technology? By communication, I mean the human being aspect of communication and also the advancement of technology. It seems impossible to do because we know the limitation of technology, what technology can do to our communication. But at the same time, it's so interesting to have communication and technology at the same time. All right, so yeah, that's, thank you.
It's very difficult to answer, okay? Anyway, first, the communication technology, I defined, quoted from the Marshall McLuhan. McLuhan defined the technology, especially media technology, as an extension of man. In that case, man, the man's function. For example, car is an extension of my foot, and the wheel is my extension of skin. Okay, but the most precious, 가장 소중한, important the technology increase in of my the value for the man. Okay, now this time the communication technology just remained as a function of the extension, a function of man's function, not the value of the man's. That is very disappointed with that. And then keep calm communication. As a communication scholar, I insist to the more communication, but I insisted the keep calm means communication with each other rather than first it's my mind, okay? And then communication, the communication other side, each other, okay? Many, the Eastern Asian, the classical text say about that so many times.
Okay, I believe that is a very good answer to you. Okay, are there anybody, one or two people, because we've already gotten 2 hours of very long the discussion. So I need one or two. Javier, okay. Why don't you give a microphone?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I want, in the first place, to congratulate the three of you for your words. And I wanted to make some remarks about your admirable presentation on semiotics. No? Really. You finished, you asked about something about the definition of communication. So I would like to make a remark from the point of view of the Western civilization history of communication. Communication meant, the word communication meant sharing until the 15th or 16th century. From then on, and with more strength from the 18th on, it meant transmission. I think there's a clue in there about what you said, no? What it meant before with more blurred meanings. I mean communion, even the Christian idea of Holy Communion is a reference to communication. I mean, when Christ blessed the bread and transformed it into the body of our Lord Jesus Christ, he was somewhat making us all share the principles of love which were shared on Christianity. No? That was my first remark. My second is that you may have been somewhat severe towards the Western rationality because that kind of rational thought was fully implemented during the first half of the 20th century by the ideas of Max Weber, the German sociologist, but it underwent a very important change during the 1940s, 1950s, with the ideas of Ludwig Wittgenstein, which was this Austrian philosopher, from this shift from the first Wittgenstein, really of a military logics, of the Tractatus philosophy, to the second one, to the books, blue and red. No? That's more a passage to a more poetic vision of the world, no? And now I think and I admire a presentation like yours because I see a sort of convergence between the ideas of which come from Korea, from China, from Tao, and ideas who come from the West, as you quoted Jacques Derrida, Baudrillard, And well, that was the idea I had, and to thank you for your excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Do you want to say something more?
Okay.
Yeah, I think that is a very beautiful comment.
My philosophy, communication philosophy, is related to the Wittgenstein's, the language philosophy. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's enough, right? You know, today's the first day and the morning. I will complete all the morning ritual ceremony, and then especially really thanks for our really distinguished keynote speaker, you know, Dr. Jong-tak Kim, and then Dr. Caroline Thomas, and then also I have to comment on Dr. Chada. Okay, you know, I just joined another big international conference, which was held in the Carolina and Colombia, and then I shared many ideas in the keynote speeches. But today's keynote speech is really better than those things. You know, I feel very impressive. These three distinguished scholars, and then gave us very insightful idea. One is the Western ideas, and the other one is the Oriental classic ideas. So I think we try to listen and these two ideas, and then for the next 5 days, we have to develop our own thoughts, our own idea, and then contribute to make the world peaceful. You know, our main motto of the World Communication Association, make world difference. But that difference is going on, peaceful difference, okay? So I hope you enjoy for next 5 days, and then also you try to develop many closer relations among the colleagues. You know, this is a unique chance for you to meet many good scholars, or if we got some of young ideas, and then you can talk to young graduate students and young scholars. Thank you for joining this keynote speech session, and then I hope you will enjoy this beautiful conference. Thank you, everybody.